Alrighty, folks, we're going to get started. So, good morning to you all, or I guess good afternoon if you're joining us from the East Coast or other places in the world. This is Ken Shaw here. I'm the CEO and founder of Infoscale, and today we are talking about backup and disaster recovery as always, but particularly a new threat to data and to operational uptime called ransomware, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But ransomware is quickly becoming one of the biggest threats to your success in terms of keeping your systems up and running and your data available. So today, we'll flip here to the agenda of the webinar in a second, but today we're going to have Carla Federigo presenting for part of the presentation, talking about ransomware. Carla is our Director of Marketing here at Infoscale and does a fantastic job. Those of you who've been to previous webinars will know her work. All of Carla's details are here on the screen, carla.federigo@infoscale.com is her email address. And my email address, if you'd like to get in touch with me, is just ken@infoscale.com. A few housekeeping things. We are recording the webinar, so you'll get an email with a link to a video within about 24 hours. You can also see the video at infoscale.com/webinars. The slides are going to be available in the handout section. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty with the GoToWebinar handouts module there in the software, so we'll sort that out during the course of the webinar. You can join in and talk to us on Twitter using our handle @Infoscale, and most importantly, during the webinar, ask questions. So I'm going to be here for the entire time, and I'll be answering questions throughout, as well as the format of the webinar. We'll do sort of a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A. In fact, the next slide we've got here lays out today's agenda. So first, we're going to look at the rise of ransomware, and in particular, the trends we've seen even just this year with a real acceleration in the number of attacks, in the severity of attacks, and in the quantum and scope of the ransoms that are being extracted from businesses. We're then going to talk about how to avoid ransomware and really how to prevent yourself getting into trouble in the first place. Then we're going to talk about implementing a proper solution so that if, God forbid, you do actually become a victim of a ransomware attack, you know what to do and you know how to recover, and that's really where we come in. And then last, we're going to do a Q&A and our prize giveaway. I'm not actually 100% sure what our prize is. Carla will tell us that in a second. But we give the prize away to the person who asked the most questions. So I can see a bunch of you have already found the questions tool and asked a bunch of, well, actually, we made it the AV check, wasn't it? But use that tool throughout to make this interactive. We try and keep it as fun and lively as possible. It's better for everybody if it's interactive and dynamic. So ask the questions. And the person who does ask the most questions is going to walk away with a fun little prize. Carla, what are we giving away for today's prize?
We are giving away a tablet today.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so the person who asks the most questions is going to get themselves a tablet computer, which is actually pretty cool. So with that, gang, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Carla here for 15 minutes, and then I'll be chiming in throughout the presentation, and then I'll be leading the Q&A, which will, go from about 1/2 an hour for about 30 minutes. So you'll be hearing from me here in a second. I can't avoid chiming in. So Carla, take it away.
Thanks, Ken. So what we're going to do to start off is really just take a look at a quick understanding of what ransomware is. And we know that ransomware can take several different forms, but really what it is a type of malware, and it denies access to a device or files until a ransom's been paid. So it encrypts all the user's files and then forces them to pay a fee to the hacker to regain access to their own data. But where the even bigger problem sets in is that ransomware encrypts the files on a workstation, and then it can travel across your network and encrypt files on your network drives. So that's really how we see that one infected user can bring down a whole department or can bring down an entire organization. So that's why we've really wanted to focus on this subject matter today, because we've seen so many of these instances come up recently. We've seen it in the news, so it's really important to be able to work against ransomware. Now, since computers have been in use, programmers have been able to create malicious software. So this is the evolution of ransomware. And even earlier than what you see on the screen, the 1986, 1989, even earlier than that, back in 1971, the creeper virus was created. So that's one of the earlier examples of how quickly malware can spread through systems. And then as you see, the high-speed encryption that evolved throughout 2006 to 2010, that really gave ransomware a much higher speed. It proliferated at an alarming rate. By 2007, as much malware was produced, that one single year in 2007, than had been produced in the previous 20 years altogether. And then, as you see in 2014, 2016 with Cryptolocker and with Locky, we're going to talk more about those in just a minute. But where does this leave us, and where are we now? Well, there are two types of organizations now. There's those that have been breached and those that have been breached but don't know it yet, right? So that's why we're saying 2016 will be the year of ransomware, and we definitely want to be able to do something about it. But let's take a look at a couple of the recent trends and why this is becoming so much more important than it was in the past. So first, almost 3,000 new malware modifications were reported in the first quarter of 2016. And what we've seen is ransomware gets activated by a user. The user lets it in. It starts modifying all the files on the system until you get a triggered message for that ransom demand. And if you get one of those demands, it's going to involve paying e-currency, a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. Then, once the hackers verify the payment, they'll provide that decryptor software. But then your computer has to start up the long process of decrypting all your files. So let's take a look at the second stat then. 72% of ransomware victims were unable to access their data for 2 days. And so 2 days, that's the fastest response time until you're back up and running. And it can take up to 5 days in other cases. And we really know that they're getting away with it because of the amount of money paid in ransoms. The FBI reported that over $200 million have been paid in ransomware in just the first 3 months of this year. So the first 3 months of 2016, over $200 million paid versus a comparison with last year, all of 2015, only $25 million was paid in ransom. And then on top of that, the ransoms will often increase as the hours pass if you don't respond. So that's another big problem with ransomware. And then you don't have really any idea for weeks or months because it's working slowly and it starts with those older files on your system. So look at the date opened or the date modified, and it starts working on first those older files, modifying all the files on your system until you get one of these messages for the ransom demand.
And Carla, maybe just go back a slide, actually. I'm going to do my first little chime in here. So there's an interesting thing going on in the market where historically hackers were a nuisance, right? And so in general, if you, like large businesses were the subject of corporate espionage and more sophisticated attacks, but in general, if a small business got caught up in a virus or a hacking, it was sort of digital vandalism, right? It's often script kiddies who take your website down or do it to prove their prowess. But there was never an economic incentive, so it was sort of digital crime without a payoff, right? Ransomware has fundamentally changed this. Ransomware is producing massive amounts of revenue for organized hacking groups. And so organized crime has actually got involved in ransomware because it's an easy way to make money. So with this economic incentive, there has been an explosion in the number of variants of ransomware, toolkits that allow you to build your own ransomware sort of attack vectors, and therefore incidents of it, right? It's rapidly become this massive shadow economy that's going on in sort of the dark web. And so this is kind of why it's so scary, is that there's a real economic incentive for these hackers to pursue ransomware. People are paying the ransom, and this is accelerating the entire trend. It's not going to abate anytime soon. So this is very, very different to the sorts of viruses or various worms that used to get publicity, sort of back in the 90s and the noughties. This, for the first time, unlocks an entire money stream for these folks. Somebody's asked me what's a script key. So most hacking isn't actually done by sophisticated hackers. Most hacking is done by somebody who gets a toolkit, right? So there are places on the dark web where you can go and get a hacking toolkit, and within a couple of days, you can be good enough at hacking that you could actually run a ransomware attack. So again, these are not highly trained, highly sophisticated people. These are just dodgy people, often in Eastern Europe or other sort of developing parts of the world, who have gotten themselves a toolkit and are using that toolkit to run these attacks. The other trend for you to point out is early on, ransomware targeted individuals, and they would attack you at home and they'd say, "Pay me $50 and I'll give you back the photos of your bar mitzvah." Well, because we literally have organized crime gangs getting involved in this, right? They're targeting businesses now that they know will pay. So hospitals and banks and credit unions and other people with mission critical services have become a really common target. And I'm not exaggerating when I say organized crime gangs. There's been a lot of coverage and a lot of evidence that shows that because of the availability of these toolkits, and because it's relatively easy to become a ransomware attacker, and because the payoff is massive, you literally have organized crime gangs in Russia and Eastern Europe and China and, again, other developing countries who are going into ransomware as a business, right? So it's quite amazing that in the space of the last 3 years, this entire illicit economy has bloomed. And the figure here on screen, is kind of mind-boggling. $200 million paid in ransom in the first 3 months of 2016. We're on track for $1 billion to be spent on this year. So that's just a little background and a few comments on sort of the development of this shadow economy and why we think it's likely for the attacks to accelerate in frequency and the ransoms to increase in quantum. Back to you, Carl.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to jump forward again to the slide that we were taking a look at. One of these messages will pop up for that ransom demand, and once the files are encrypted, the hackers are going to display this screen. In the past, you've seen, like the one in red on the left, the ransom there was $300 US. So in the past, we've seen $300 to $500 range being where ransoms started. But fast forward to 2016, and companies are being hit with ransoms in the thousands of dollars. Like Ken was just pointing out, that over $200 million has been paid in ransom in just the first 3 months of 2016. And on top of all that, so many different types of ransomware in circulation. So all these different strains, Cryptolocker, Ransom32, Locky, many others as well. Cryptolocker is one. It targets computers running Windows, and what it does is restrict access to those infected computers. And Cryptolocker appears to have been spreading through fake emails. There were emails designed to sort of mimic the look of legitimate businesses. So it was coming through phony FedEx and UPS tracking notices. Ransom32 is one that Ken was just mentioning. It's essentially a variety of ransomware as a service. So that's one that's effectively putting the power of creating ransomware into the hands of just about anyone, regardless of any technical know-how. So what makes this one really dangerous is that it's encoded entirely using JavaScript. So it can be used to target computers running Windows, Mac OS X, and Linux. And then there are many others as well. Locky is one that we've all heard of recently quite often. It renames all of your important files so that the extension .locky is added, and then encrypts them, of course, so that only the cyber criminals have that decryption key. But this one is really one that changes the game. Locky is really important because first, it's targeting a worldwide audience. So it's really one of the biggest that we've been seeing lately. One of the main routes of infection that we saw with Locky has been through spam email campaigns. And a lot of these are actually disguised as invoices. And like Ken just mentioned, what we saw in the early days of ransomware is that hackers are only going after consumers and their individual files and folders. But these strains, like Locky and like some of these other more developed ransomware strains, strands are increasingly affecting businesses. So what we've seen is that businesses throughout Europe, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, they've all been hit by these massive email spam campaigns. And then even closer to home here, businesses were targeted recently by Amazon.com. So Amazon.com, there was a massive phishing campaign. It was estimated that about 30 to 100 million spam messages claiming to be Amazon.com, they were claiming to be a shipping order update. And that's how those businesses got infected. And then the even bigger problem is what we were just mentioning, that it encrypts the files on that one workstation, but then it can travel across the entire network and encrypt files on the network drives. So one single Locky infected user can bring down a whole organization. So now we're going to look at how the hackers really infect that machine, and what do you do if you have any of these symptoms. We know now that those hackers are using phishing emails, they're using free software downloads, unpatched programs, online advertising even, that can all unknowingly get you infected with malware. And we know that in the most common scenario, that attack starts when a user opens a malicious attachment. So what do you do if you're infected? And more importantly, how do you prevent an attack from happening? So now we're gonna shift gears, and now that we have a really good understanding of what ransomware is and how it's working, we're going to shift and talk about what can be done to prevent it, and really some of those best practices. So we want to work against ransomware. And of course, it's important to have antivirus, but that's more like a firewall, just stopping things from coming in. But if you lack sophisticated cybersecurity infrastructure for anti-malware to stop things once they're already on your system, then you're at risk. And really right now, none of us are immune to these types of high-profile attacks. Plus, everyone has irreplaceable data. So what we want to do is really effectively and affordably take the proper preventative measures. Before we get into that, though, I want to launch a quick poll. So I want to hear from you guys. Let me go ahead and get this poll launched, and you should see that coming up on your screen in just a moment. All right, so this poll is simply asking, when it comes to ransomware, which of these is you? A, yes, I've been a victim of ransomware, and that would either be, yes, I myself or one of my clients has been a victim of ransomware. B, no, I haven't experienced this type of security breach. Or C, I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. And we've got 65% of you had voted so far. I'll leave it up a few more minutes for everyone to vote. Looks like so far we are pretty split. It's very close to 50-50, but as more votes are coming in, so far we have 40% are saying yes, I've been a victim of ransomware, or one of my customers has been a victim of ransomware. 47% say no, and we have 9% who say, I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. I'm curious to hear from that 9% of you. Why don't you think you will be affected? And then a comment from Michael says, I was, but it didn't matter. Michael, why was it that it didn't matter to you? Great, okay, and so far we have 92% of you have voted. So with that, I'll go ahead and close this poll down. And I'll share the results with everyone. So we can see that 44% responded A, 47% B, no, I haven't experienced this, and 9%, I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. I'm really curious also to hear from that 44% of you who said yes. What happened in that case, and did you pay the ransom? Okay, with that, let me close the poll down and jump back into the presentation. And can everyone see that back up on their screen now? Great. Okay, so now we're going to move into avoiding ransomware. So switching gears now. And we're going to talk about BDR. Someone earlier asked, what does BDR mean? So it's backup and disaster recovery. And this can protect you, but only if you do it right. So right now, most of us really look at just two options if there's an infection of ransomware. So since the ransomware is silently and slowly working over weeks or even months, it's encrypting files on your computer. That's why having a backup solution in place and also regularly testing backups to make sure that they're running properly, that's one critical part of protecting your business from ransomware. And if you don't have access to a recent backup, then you'll really likely be stuck with no choice but to pay that ransom. But that definitely takes time. So consider, would the downtime be costlier than paying the ransom? Things to consider are, what's your cost per hour of downtime? How did it affect your business? And really, backup is one solution, but we're going to talk about a second coming up here. But what do you do immediately if you do get infected? So if you do get infected, first, just remove the infected machine from the network. So you want to stop the malware from spreading immediately. And you always have to assume that the malware is making use of that internet connection and it's spreading itself to others. So you need to isolate the machine and stop all network communication from that spread of malware. And then next, you want to reset your BIOS time. So in some instances, you can reset the BIOS to stop the clock, and this is really going to give you more time to prepare your backups, prepare your recovery. And then also, according to Privacy PC, they said that IT admins don't need to be afraid of that ransomware countdown, that countdown timer that's doubling the ransom if you don't pay within an hour, for example, if you reset your BIOS time back. And again, that's according to Privacy PC. So by doing this, it's going to give you more time to just calm down, recover your key files, and eliminate that malware. Then third, if you are hit with malware, you want to be able to roll back from a previous backup. Having that recent backup is going to make it really easy for you to restore operations as quickly and painlessly as possible, saving as much time and money for yourself and for the business. So here are a couple of screenshots of my backup account with Infrascale. And by default, Infrascale keeps everything. So I have every version ever backed up, and I can roll back to any date that I choose. And since I regularly back up my machine, I just could recover my useful files and keep working if I were infected by malware. But one really important point of that I just mentioned is that Infrascale keeps everything by default. And that's really important. That forever archiving is really critical because most BDR systems age content out after a few weeks or maybe a month. And because ransomware can take weeks or months to get into your systems discreetly, it's not just the idea of having any old backup system in place. It's having a backup system with a forever archiving component built in as well. But my Infrascale account isn't just the backup and recovery manager. This is my Infrascale dashboard. So it's a quick snapshot where I'm provided with just one unified management console for all of my data protection. I can view activity alerts, I can access reporting and access monitoring, I can set up retention policies, I can monitor account usage, control remote deployments. So it's a really powerful dashboard with everything that I need when it comes to data protection. And we also have account level details. So this account level details screenshot here is where you see those analytics tabs, the last 24 hours, last 30 days, the calendar view, et cetera, et cetera. And we already know that when ransomware goes through your system, it's modifying all of the files that it touches. So if it's a file that you're backing up, we'll recognize it as a changed file. So what we did with this account level details, all of the information that we have here and these analytics that we have access to, we created a new monitoring alert. So it's brand new. And what we did with this alert, we call it Anomaly Detection. So how it works is if you have a large number of newly modified files, then you're going to want to know what happened. You want to know what's touching all of my data. So an average backup of change files will just continue as normal. But if you have an unusually large backup, that's going to trigger an anomaly alert. So in this alert, you're going to know, okay, here's something you need to investigate, see what could be happening. Consider that you may have malware. Let's take a look then at this anomaly detection in action. This is a really quick, just 1-minute video. And so here's my Infoscale dashboard homepage. Let me just go back here to that video. Okay, there we go. So we're just going to run through how you set up an anomaly warning. So just in the Settings tab, by clicking Monitoring, you'll be brought to the monitoring settings. And here you can see just at the bottom where you can enable anomaly detection. And then here the threshold, we allow you to set the threshold. It's the warning that's released when that threshold's passed. So what we're doing is calculating a rolling average of the number of modified files over time for each device. And then if the modified file count surpasses that threshold, we'll release the warning. And then those warnings automatically appear in the general monitoring page as well. So here you can see more info. You can see an event. You can open the details to see things like backup duration, total files processed, how many were modified, et cetera, et cetera. And then here by managing, you can also download the logs to investigate at file level right there. So typical users we've seen, they back up 5 to 10 modified files per day because so much work is done online. So anything about 3 to 4 or more times that is going to be cause for investigation. And this proactive alerting is something that nobody else has right now. No BDR solutions out there today have this type of warning. Really, right now, everyone's just sort of waiting to get infected and then quickly trying to either pay the ransom or roll back to a previous date and scrambling for a solution. So in addition to this new warning with anomaly detection, Infoscale also provides double-blind encryption protection for all servers, workstations, endpoints, whether it be PC, Mac, mobile devices. Also the unlimited archiving that I mentioned just a moment ago, really important to keep all of those files. It's fast and automatic, like you see in the bottom left. So automated data protection, those retention policies are something that the admin can control. And then we do offer unlimited test recoveries as well. So you can then go and ensure that all those policies you set are working properly the way you want them to, the way that you set them up. And then lastly, 24/7 support. We offer US-based support 365 days a year. So you are always able to contact us if anything if any questions should arise where you do need support. Not to mention, we're already protecting thousands of businesses globally. So each of these red dots represents a business that Infoscale is protecting. And this is via our globally dispersed data centers. So we have 16 geographically dispersed data centers. And each of these businesses I mentioned is one that we protect. And we've been talking here quite a bit about backup and recovery. But that's only one option. And what if it's not enough? So we've been talking also about how long it can take to fully recover all of your data from a really large backup. And then on top of the need to first recover your data, you need all of your servers and applications back, all in the right order. So that's where another solution comes into play, and it's disaster recovery as a service, or DRaaS. So with disaster recovery as a service, you can quickly fail over your systems And it supports DR to be on demand. So disaster recovery on demand would be like in this scenario here. So here are some end users. In this situation, they're just working. Unknown to them is that they're about to experience a ransomware attack. But with on-demand failover, so there those red X's are symbolizing that attack, you can simply log in from any browser, even on the laptop, a tablet, or on a smartphone. So from any browser, you can recover and virtualize the entire environment. So that way you can roll back to a previous state and instantly recover a clean version of that entire environment. It's not just files and folders. That way, all the users can keep working. And this whole process is happening in just minutes. So you don't have to wait days for an entire backup. Now here's a little bit of a more detailed way to look at it. So here's on the left is the traditional backup and recovery flow. So you have the production box and the backup server, which is then, of course, copying to some offsite storage. It could be a tape drive, it could be on-prem disk, it could be the cloud, but it's just copying data over. And then when a disaster happens, that sort of fire and that alert symbol is the disaster in this case, then you have to copy that data back out of storage, and after that, reconfigure everything. And all of this is going to take time. So that entire recovery time could take, like we saw earlier, 2 to 5 days. But on the right, you see the difference with disaster recovery as a service, or DRaaS. It's a much faster recovery. You still have that production in the backup, but it's very different because with DRaaS, you don't want to be copying everything twice or moving data around. You want to just spin up a working environment where the data is. And what we can do is virtualize and create up to 200 machines on the fly and just reconstruct your entire infrastructure where your data is sitting. So in comparison to days to recover, you can fail over in 15 minutes or less. And this is a really, really important point because of how we saw earlier that evolution of ransomware. The primary issue used to be just individual data loss, but now ransomware will spread over an entire network. Now ransomware is really representing the threat of data loss, but also business interruption and massive downtime. So that's really what InfraScale is aiming to solve. Our mission is to eradicate downtime, and really we focus on business continuity. Now I have another quick poll for you guys. So I'm going to launch this second poll. So far, we have 68% of you have voted. I'll leave it up just another moment for everyone to participate. And in that 73%, right now, 74% are answering A. I can confidently roll back. So can you, those 70% who answered A, are you able to fail over your systems within just a few minutes? Do you have on-demand failover, or are you looking at rolling back to a previous backup alone, and how long would that take you? Several days? 30% say, I wish I had, they are answering B, I wish I had a backup and disaster recovery solution. Let's see, 3% are saying, I don't think I need failover DR. I still don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. Got 86% of you have voted so far. Okay, we've got about 90% of you have voted, so I'll go ahead and close this poll and share the results here so that everyone can get a view. 70% in the end said, A, I can confidently roll back to a previous backup anytime. I'd love to hear from you in the comments, the questions software. You can just let me know how long would that take you and what's that going to cost your business. And then B, 27% said, I wish I had a backup and disaster recovery solution but can't afford it. And we'll talk about that because really an affordable and effective solution is within reach, and a failover solution at that, at the cost of backup. 3% are saying, I don't think I need failover DR. I don't think I'll be affected by ransomware. So really curious to hear from that 3% of you. But I am glad that that percentage decreased from the first time. So that's good news. All right, let me go ahead and hide these results of the poll and jump back into the presentation. Now, do be sure to get all of your questions into that question tool. We have just about 5 minutes left or so, and then we are going to jump into the Q&A. Like Ken mentioned in the very beginning, we are doing a giveaway today. So that giveaway is going to go to, it's a free tablet, and the winner is going to be the person that asks the most relevant and on-topic questions. So get all of your questions in now. Make sure to do that. All right, so you should be seeing my screen back up on your screen now. So the next steps here, since we've talked about these two great solutions, Infrascale does offer backup and disaster recovery and failover on demand. So that way you don't have to sacrifice any of your critical data, you don't have to pay any ridiculously high ransoms, and you don't have any lost profits due to downtime. So our customers haven't paid anything in ransomware, and we don't want you to have to do that either. Right now, ransomware is the #1 cybersecurity threat. And I'd like to offer everyone on this webinar today, just for being here and participating, we really appreciate your time in doing that. So I want to offer everyone 60 days free to get set up and test it out and see how Infrascale works for yourself. To take advantage of that and to make use of that, simply use the question tool and let me know that you'd like that free 60 days. Or you can always email me. My email is on this screen here as well, carla.federigo@infrascale.com. So either send me an email, all you need to say is, I want the 60 days free, or just use the question tool for that. All right, and with that, we are going to jump in now to the Q&A. Now, Aaron Jordan is our senior sales engineer who is going to be here with us today, but we do, of course, have Ken, who is our founder and CEO, on the line. So I'm instead going to turn it over to Ken for the Q&A, and make sure to get all of your questions in for that giveaway. So over to you, Ken.
Cool. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everybody. We have quite a few questions on the line, actually, so let's dive in. I've been typing away and answering a few of these as Carla was presenting. But yeah, so we're giving away that tablet, guys. Remember that, so go ahead and ask questions. The person who asks the most questions is going to get that tablet. So going to the top of the list, our first question today comes from Chris. What's the most common ransomware that poses a threat? So, Chris, there's a variety of ransomware strains. Locky has been very popular lately. And so I think more important than worrying about one individual ransomware strain is the fact that they're changing quickly, right? And so you can't really just focus on protecting yourself from one particular strain because, you know, three months from now, there's going to be another one. The overall techniques that Carl was talking about earlier, firstly, making sure you've got a good malware detection and AV protection suite installed that can sort of block ransomware at the perimeter. Secondly, you know, when you detect an infection, taking the computer off the network. Thirdly, having a great BDR solution in place like Infrascale that lets you roll back to any point in time. In particular, not having, you know, sort of restrictions on aging data out. These are the solutions these are the techniques you should use to protect yourself, and they're going to work whether it's, you know, it's Locky that's hit you or, you know, or any other strain. Nicole asks, what's the stance on actually paying the ransom? The most firms follow a non-negotiation stance with regards to cyber attacks. Nicole, it's just not that simple. So many firms are ill-prepared to handle this. Many firms do not actually have backup systems in place that will let them recover quickly. So when you think about backup systems, it's not just whether or not you can get your data back, it's how quickly you can get your data back. And so many firms do end up paying the ransom, unfortunately, right? Because they might have their data in an archive, but they may be faced with a week, to get all that data back, and they just can't afford to be down for a week. So this is why we've been stressing that speed of recovery as much as anything else. It's not good enough to just have a backup solution in place. You've got to really have a good DR solution in place that allows you to recover in minutes or hours, because that's the only way that you can actually afford to, sort of then not worry about paying the ransom. So the next question we've got is Michael, and Michael says, are there different similar components in ransomware that I could look for, executables to watch for? Michael, there are, but I wouldn't recommend trying to do that. I would recommend getting a good AV engine, like from Malwarebytes, for example, another company that we're allied with, or AVG, another partner of ours. That's really what they do, and they're professionals at it. They're going to help you detect if you've been infected. Now, of course, then the question becomes, what do you do, if you get infected? And that's where we come in. We can be the guys who actually sort of save you from, the hostage scenario. We were joking around the other day at a staff meeting, which is like, if your friend actually was taken hostage or kidnapped, then, sort of who do you call, right? And it's a metaphor, of course, but we're the company you call to go and get the hostage back. Now, at the same time, you want to be working with somebody who can prevent that scenario from happening in the first place, right? So you really need the 1-2 punch of like a good malware provider or a good security provider, and then a good BDR provider who can really help you get that data back if you are attacked and if your data is taken hostage. All right, what's the next question? Oh, yeah, so Michael also asked, what does BDR stand for? BDR is just a common contraction for backup and disaster recovery. James asked, are group policies an effective method of preventing base levels of ransomware? James, it really depends. My gut reaction is not really. That's not what it was designed for. And so it would be a pretty clumsy way to try and detect or prevent. And I suspect that most ransomware strains these days would just dodge right around it. So again, I'd recommend putting, we can help you detect ransomware. We can help you then recover your system to an earlier time where you weren't infected. Our Anomaly Detection system is great for the detection component there. And again, we'd recommend partnering with Malwarebytes or partnering with AVG to help you actually have that perimeter defense as well. Okay, so what's the next question we've got? All right, so Pam says, I've seen ransomware but wasn't able to retrieve data. Is it best to shut the PC down when it happens to stop more files getting infected? And you can do that, certainly, and then pop the disk out of the system, and then you can try and recover the data, offline. I think the most important things, really Carla covered, and maybe Carla wants to add a few more comments here. She's been quiet, but the most important thing you do is take the computer off the network and reset that BIOS clock time. Another question here is script kiddies. Carla, do you want to take that one? No, it doesn't look like. Okay, so all right, it's all me, guys. So script kiddies, these are the sort of, this is a phrase I use. These are the people who are downloading these hacking toolkits and are executing attacks using these toolkits, right? So it sort of allows really non-savvy hackers to actually, engage in this. So unfortunately, no longer do you actually need to be a computer expert to be executing hack attacks. You can sort of download these toolkits and cause all sorts of problems by using them. And so script kiddies is a very common sort of term for, teenagers who are doing that sort of thing. What are the next question from Michael? What are the main verticals being attacked? Michael, in general, we're seeing a trend toward ransomware targeting sectors where the hackers anticipate they're likely to pay. So healthcare, we're seeing a lot of financial services, banks. I was at a bank the other day, a very large bank actually, who was telling me that they were attacked by ransomware and had to pay their ransom. It was in the news just the other day. A hospital had to pay a $30,000 ransom because their backup systems wouldn't get them back up online in time. And that's really probably one of the most important points of today's webinar, is that it's not enough to have a backup system. You've got to have a backup system that's going to get you back up and running in minutes, right? Because that hospital did in fact have a system, but they knew that the time it would take to restore all their systems from their off-site backups was too long, and therefore it would cost them less money to pay the darn ransom than it would be to use their own system, which is absolutely crazy. So again, focus on that recovery time objective and how can you get your systems back up and running in minutes. I'll wager that most can't. We normally have a poll actually that says that, but we normally ask the audience, can you bring back all your critical systems in 15 minutes or less? So if you're building burn to the ground or what have you, how long would it take you? And most folks can't do it in even 24 hours, let alone 15 minutes. Okay, so we've got heaps more questions here. Chris writes, how many anomaly protection alerts are needed to be set up in order to effectively detect the majority of ransomware? Chris, using our anomaly detection system, you just set up anomaly detection across your entire account. So that's relatively straightforward, and you saw that video that Carla played that was it's an easy alert to turn on when you're using the Infrascale system that'll help tell you if you've actually been infected. Question here from Gigi, is Infrascale HIPAA compliant? Gigi, we are. Not only are we HIPAA compliant, but we're also PCI compliant, FINRA compliant, SARBOX compliant, CJIS compliant. So security has long been a key sort of platform of Infrascale's solution. We do a lot of business with financial services institutions, hospitals, police departments, Department of Justice, other highly regulated industries. Michael asks, do you have agents for other operating systems like Mac OS X, Linux, and AIX? Yes, Michael, we do. So we support actually over more than 100 versions of various operating systems. And so that includes obviously Windows and Mac, but it also includes the major hypervisors like Hyper-V or VMware. And when we go into the physical server land, we're talking about Windows on metal, Unix on metal, and Linux on metal. Gigi also asks, how many restore points are you allowed to have in a day? Well, Gigi, it's totally configurable. So most people would usually set 1 per hour or 2 per hour, but that's all configurable. All right, what's the next question here, though? James asks, is it better to use shadow copy or an actual backup recovery system in place? James, I think you're referring to VSS within Windows, right? If you are, then yeah, no, you should not rely on shadow copy. You should absolutely put a real backup system in place so you have a true secondary storage layer. The shadow copy system isn't super reliable, and you really want a true system that specializes in providing a backup solution. Oh, I just noticed that Carla's added those handouts, guys, to the handouts section. So we talked earlier about the ability to download slides and download handouts. You can see those being populated there. So good on you, Carla. All right, what's next? Matthew asks, are ransomware attackers going after small businesses too? Matthew, I would say primarily small businesses, right? They're going after the people who are likely to just pay $500 to move on and are less likely to have a sophisticated line of defense. And by the way, that is small business to a T. So yeah, small business is being attacked with increasing frequency. It's kind of scary. Matthew also asks, what competitors do you have that we can look at? So Matthew, we compete with people like Unitrends, with Datto, with Axient. Of course, we also compete with Veritas, Commvault, and Arcserve, and the more legacy vendors as well. All right. Chris also asks, what's the most relevant ransomware that your customers have been affected by? Chris, we've been seeing Locky a lot lately, but it really does change every 6 months, so it's hard to generalize. Matthew asks, where can I go to learn more about ransomware? Well, Matthew, a great place to start would be to download the ebooks and the handouts that Carl is uploading right now to the handouts section. In particular, there's an ebook in there about ransomware, which is a really good place to start. It's a really good primer on sort of ransomware, how it evolved, what are the major strains, what to do about it, and where we think it's going. We got a question here from Andre. Says, I read that InfraScale's backups are agentless. How do you accommodate that? So, Andre, this we'll work over the network. So we'll hook into APIs in various systems, like in VMware or Hyper-V or others, and then we'll actually do the protection without installing software right on the box. Matthew also writes, where can I find out what small businesses are having to pay when being ransomed? Matthew, right now it's hovering in the hundreds of dollars range. We've seen demands for thousands of dollars, but that's relatively uncommon. So the most common ransom demand we're seeing is in the range of a few $100s. Stefan writes, how could a global operating company with locations around the world and many different types of servers like Exchange, SAP, DCS with no internal cloud, realize a backup and disaster recovery solution? Stefan, that's precisely our use case. So because we're a cloud-based vendor and because we're using the cloud to protect your service, so long as these machines have access to the internet, we can help you protect them, no matter how many there are, no matter where they are, right? So the more distributed your data set, the more powerful our solution is. All right, so we've got about 5 more minutes here, and we're going to have to announce that winner. So, Carla, I hope you're starting to figure out who's won that prize. And let's answer a few more questions here. So, Matthew asked, where is ransomware going in its next generation? How is ransomware technology going to improve? One of the scarier things that we're seeing, Matthew, is the move into sort of attacking the network. So whereas once upon a time ransomware just encrypted your disk, they then started to encrypt USB drives that you have connected. And now they're doing something that's much scarier, at least to my brain. They're going out and encrypting anything they can find on the network. What's horrific about that is that now if you've got one idiot in, pick a department who clicks on a link or engages in bad internet hygiene and gets infected, and we all know we have those people, working around us, that one node can now go out and start to infect the entire, network of the business, start encrypting the drives on the server, and all of a sudden that one person can bring the entire business to its knees, right? So that, to me, is the scariest attack vector that's going on. And so I think we're going to see more and more ransomware that is targeting businesses instead of consumers, because businesses are paying the ransoms, and that are going to attack other resources on the network, not just the machine in question that was infected. Next question, what's the largest ransomware you guys have seen? $30,000 is the largest one we've seen, which is pretty scary. Chris asks, are there any AV solutions or anti-malware solutions that we recommend? Chris, we do. So we are good friends with both AVG and Malwarebytes, and we recommend both. Okay. Lots more questions here. Now, if we don't get to all your questions, folks, we're going to email you and follow up. So I'm just going to keep going through these, but if we don't get to all your questions, we will be in touch. All right, next one. Do continuous cloud backup services have a risk of infection? They do, Randall. So if you're using a Dropbox, ransomware is going to hit your Dropbox as well. So just because you're using sort of cloud storage doesn't mean that you're being protected from this. You need to get yourself a backup tool that really specializes and focuses on protecting from the ransomware use case. The next one, Matthew asks, do you offer discounts for schools? We do, Matthew. We've got quite an aggressive discount program for government schools and not-for-profits. Pam asks, with that speed of recovery you offer, is it a physical hardware in my location? Pam, it is, yes. So, we can ship an appliance or we can do it in software. All right, so there's about 15 questions here that we can't get to right now, guys. Carla is going to send you each an email. So sorry about that, but she's going to be in touch. We are, though, going to do a last poll, and we're going to announce the prize winner. So stand by for that, and let me pass the ball back to Carla.
Thanks, Ken. So I've launched that last poll, simply asking, would you like to learn more about ransomware? So A, yes, I'd like to learn about InfraScale and failover DRAS. B, yes, I'd like some educational ransomware or backup and disaster recovery information. C, no, not yet, but maybe later. So I just wanted to give everyone a chance to answer that last poll, and also grab those handouts. I did put 3 different handouts in that section. One is a copy of the slides from today. Another is a ransomware survival guide, and then another is the 2016 Disaster Recovery Attitudes and Adoption Report. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and announce the winner for today's tablet. Let's see here in the questions. It looks like Matthew. Congratulations. Matthew, I will reach out to you via email before the end of the week, so I'd like to confirm your address for mailing, so congrats on that. Everyone else who's joined today, thank you so much for your time, and we very much look forward to working with you. Ken, any last questions or comments or anything before we close out?
Just this, guys. Look, ransomware is a growing threat. You know, if you're a partner or reseller on the line, you do need to think about this for your clients. If you're an end user, remember sort of the 1-2 punch. You need a good security system, a good AV module, like from our friends at AVG or Malwarebytes. Then you also need a backup solution or a BDR solution that allows you to recover in minutes. And that speed of recovery is everything. If it's going to take you 2 days to recover from your system, then you're not really protected from ransomware, and you may find yourself having to actually pay that ransom, right? And so if you don't have a system that allows you to recover in minutes, get in touch with us. We would, we'd love to show you our solution, and you can try it for free, and we can have somebody get in touch with you. So thank you, everybody, for your attention, and hopefully we'll see you again at another webinar in the future.